Welcome to FO Exclusive. I'm Atul Singh.
And I am Glenn Carl.
Today we have three important issues, and those three important issues will not come as a surprise. First, big trouble in Israel and Gaza. Second, non-stop drama in the US Congress. New non-stop drama in the US Congress. Third, Emperor Xi Jinping now gets rid of another minister. So, Glenn, what's going on in Israel and what happens now?
Okay, well, this one I could easily fill up an entire hour with. And it's
please don't. We should do only maybe 25 minutes on this.
It's been most of where I have focused my attention for, I guess, conventional, understandable reasons. So I think we all know that on October 7, Hamas, which I'll talk about primarily in a moment, launched an attack across the border through the security wall with Israel, on the Gazan-Israeli border, into southern Israel. And in a day, about 1,500 or more Hamas fighters massacred 1,300 or 1,400 Israelis. Not just killing them, but in systematically committing atrocities. Quite intentionally, they beheaded infants in front of their mothers. Then they raped, then they killed, then they beheaded the mothers, and beheading others, and then mutilating bodies in front of families. This was quite systematic. And then as Hamas was doing this, triumphantly filming a lot of it to post on various sites to show how they had dehumanized and conquered the Jew. Israel's response has been massive, yet so far, and this word I will use will shock and offend probably some people, so far has been still restrained compared to what is threatened. They've used their aviation and artillery largely to fire into, to bomb Gaza, where they're and have killed, as of yesterday, over 5,000 Palestinians. We don't know how many Hamas members and fighters have been killed, but there are a significant number apparently. We don't know that, but we do know 5,000 Palestinians, many of whom, if not the overwhelming number, as in perhaps even nearly all, are simple civilian Palestinians, including large numbers of children. Israel threatens to invade with a stated objective of destroying Hamas as an organization, killing its leadership or seizing it, killing its fighters or detaining them, and destroying all of its facilities, its war violence-making capability and infrastructure. To do that would require the Israeli military in various forms going into Gaza and clearing and then destroying 500 kilometers of tunnels that Hamas has constructed over the past couple of decades and from which it operates. Many of Hamas's sites from which they launch their rockets or conduct operations or stage and so on, are co-located with normal Palestinian life locations, mosques and daycare centers and schools and hospitals, so that if there's an errant Israeli bomb, it will kill innocent people and destroy civilian facilities. But if there's a successfully targeted Israeli bomb, it will do the same, because Hamas quite consciously has made one of its methods to use the Palestinian people as human shields and force the Israelis to commit war crimes in the conduct of a war that they're trying to kill Hamas in as the legitimate enemy. So that's what's happened. But I will talk for a moment about what Hamas is, what the implications of the current conflict are, which are really the indissociable things. And then I'll have to talk also, one must talk also about why this has occurred. Could you put up, I'm going to quickly show three little visuals so that people have a sense of what's happening. Almost all of us will know about, we read news about foreign issues, but we don't, yeah, there you go. We don't have a sense in a firsthand way of what this sort of implies. I spoke recently to a local group. This is why there's a map of Massachusetts. I live in Massachusetts. Up. But for most of you, this will give some sense, and as I describe it, will make sense why I've put this up. Massachusetts, from Boston, which you can see, to Pittsfield, to the western border, is about 250 kilometers. It takes three and a half hours to drive on a highway from one end to the other. North to south is roughly 80 kilometers. It takes an hour or so. It's Massachusetts, the entire state, including Cape Cod on the right, which I've colored in, has an area of about 22,000 square kilometers. If you see the black line on the right, I have colored off Cape Cod, and up in the top left, which is northwest there, I've made a rhomboid, which is a little larger than it should be to be a scale, but it's close, which is about 22 by 9 kilometers square. The top left is the size of Gaza. That's where the fighting's occurring now. In that little square, which is a beautiful rural area where Williams College is located in Massachusetts, there are 2.2 million Gazan Palestinians and Hamas, which has about 30,000 fighters, members. In the southeast, there, the colored off Cape Cod, the peninsula you see, that's about the area of the West Bank, where there are 3 million Palestinians and now 450,000 Israeli Jewish settlers, most of whom are ultra-conservative, highly Orthodox practicing Jews.
Or in other words, Glenn, nutcases. They have a millenarian, messianic view of the world. They are not that different to Hamas. Maybe they are. I mean, they are not a terrorist organization, but they are fundamentalists as well, and they've pushed Israeli politics in a right-wing direction.
In the remaining part of the uncolored in parts of Massachusetts, that's almost exactly the size of Israel. So everything is happening in an area that you can drive in about 4 hours. Israel's a little longer, a little thinner in some places. Can you put up the second one now? So here's Israel. Turn Massachusetts, 90 degrees and north-south axis instead of east-west, as I had the Massachusetts map. And the red is the West Bank and Gaza, as indicated. That's where the Palestinians are. And the orange is where the Israelis are. And you'll notice the thinnest part. It's about 25 kilometers wide. Now, look at the smaller circle I've drawn. That is from several years ago, the range of the rockets, the missiles that Hamas had then fired from Gaza. So essentially you can see that 4 years ago, Hamas was able to strike almost anywhere in Israel. Today their technology has evolved from Iran, and they can now strike essentially everywhere in Israel. If you look at the larger circle, which almost you can't see in the map, but you can see parts of the circle far outside of Israel, that is the range of the rockets and missiles that Hezbollah has. Hezbollah is a Shia organization, political and military, in Lebanon, which is directly to the north, the white part above the orange. That is the border of Israel and Lebanon. And from there, from within Lebanon, Hezbollah, which is also engaged in combat with Israel at present, can launch missiles that cover all of Israel. Now, let's see the third one. So this is from a 30-minute period in November 21st, I think it was, 2021. The day doesn't matter, but this just happens to be that 30-minute period. These are not where rockets landed. I don't know precisely where the rockets landed during those 30 minutes. But Hamas launched rockets for that 30-minute period on November 21st, 2021. These are air raid alerts where Israelis had to go to their bomb shelters because they were in danger of being blown up from a rocket. That's just a 30-minute period. And that is the reality of Israel and the West Bank and Gaza. 2.2 million Palestinians stuck in a teeny area. They cannot leave. 450,000 Israelis settling in the West Bank. West Bank Palestinians do have more freedom of movement and have some control of themselves, but they only control the Palestinian Authority, which rules the West Bank, only controls 16% of the West Bank. Israel controls 60% of the West Bank, and the remaining part is nominally under Palestinian Authority control, but in fact there are joint operations, and Israel really has the say there too. And then in Israel, where there are 10 million people, you can see the reality every day of the threat from Hamas. Now, Hamas, what is Hamas? You can take that off now. Thank you, Atul. Hamas was created I won't go through a detailed history. It was created in the late 80s, and it emerged from the Muslim Brotherhood. It's very important, that fact. The Muslim Brotherhood
came out of the Intifada. Came out of the Intifada, which was an uprising launched by Fatah. Yasser Arafat's party.
Israeli domination of Palestinians, and the lack of Palestinian homeland, the lack of a separate state, and so on. And the Muslim Brotherhood, however, has existed for a century with two missions. One, initially to oppose British colonialism, which has morphed into opposing Western, largely U.S. influence on Muslim societies, which is really not stated, but is clearly a struggle of Islam to adjust to the modern world. And then the second objective is that the Muslim Brotherhood, and thus Hamas, which is quite explicit about it, has as its mission to destroy Israel, not to coexist under any circumstance. It will only succeed if it destroys Israel, kills every Jew, and makes an Islamic state on these Islamic lands. That is its mission. It has not changed. Its members are sincere in their beliefs, and that is what the Israelis, many of whom have sought a two-state solution, some of whom do not, as we've seen in the West Bank, must contend with. The Israelis thought, this is Netanyahu's government, that they had contained Hamas, and Hamas was starting to evolve to accept the de facto separation, to rule, rather than to seek to kill Israelis.
Can I have very quickly a word in? Israelis, especially Bibi Netanyahu, and some others, but Bibi Netanyahu in particular, because he's been in power for so long, were fundamentally opposed to the two-state solution, and they did not like the Fatah's leadership and claim for a Palestinian state. Initially, actually, they backed Hamas because they thought it was a religious and social welfare organization. They thought it would weaken Fatah. They thought it would split the Palestinians.
Liberation Organization.
Exactly. No, Fatah was a party, and then Palestinian Liberation Organization had all others too, but Fatah was the main wing of it. So they wanted to weaken the Palestinian Liberation Authority with Fatah, and later, of course, this morphed into the Palestinian Authority. And Hamas ended up being a Frankenstein's monster for them, because Hamas was fundamentally a terrorist organization. They were anti-Semitic to its core. Muslim Brotherhood, when it began, its founders had anti-Semitism as core of their ideology. Hassan Banna,
in fact, a big
Sayyid
part of
Qutb.
Hamas's charter is actually derived from Russian intelligence disinformation in 1903. The Russian intelligence service really, they didn't write, but they disseminated, propagated, and made world famous the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a profoundly anti-Semitic tract. That's relevant because that is part, that perspective, and many of the ostensible assertions and facts are taken right from that in Hamas's charter. Far extremist Muslims have been deeply affected by the anti-Semitism of the Russian intelligence service, which is just insane, but true.
And mind you, that was the Tsar, because the communist revolution comes in 1917. Yes. So it ties back to Russian pogroms, which were late 19th century, which were fundamentally persecuting the Jews, even massacring them. And that led to massive Jewish immigration, not just to the US, but to the UK, Australia, and South Africa. There were Jews literally paying ship captains to take them away. And one of my friends, his family didn't have the money to board a ship to either the UK or the US. And they could only get on a ship to South Africa. And we don't want to go into too much history. Both of us are historians by training. But the point is that, I'll just finish it, is that Hamas soon turned out to be a huge headache. And Israelis had to kill the blind sheikh, Sheikh Yassin, through an airstrike, and others through an airstrike. And in fact, the person who's launched the attacks, Mohammed Deif, Israel tried to kill him but failed. And Israel, Bibi Netanyahu thought that with Hamas ruling Gaza, it would morph into a more reasonable entity. And the reality is that Israel paid the price for a fatal miscalculation by Bibi.
The reason all of this is directly relevant to the impossible crisis now is that Hamas rejects the two-state solution and seeks the destruction of Israel and the death of all the Jews. The government of Netanyahu has worked to undercut the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and to work with Hamas, because that makes a two-state solution less likely. And correctly, up until now, the Israelis of Netanyahu's government calculated that we can manage a threat from the Palestinians who are helpless, and I can soothe or accommodate my far-right coalition members who want to settle and seize the territories of the West Bank, which are biblically Jewish from their perspective, while reaching strategic peace agreements with Muslim states around the world, thereby guaranteeing the security of Israel. That's been true until it isn't.
And they did achieve it, and they did achieve peace with UAE. They had the Abraham Accords, Morocco, right. And the underlying thesis was that economics drives interests, and economics will trump religious sentiment and ethnic sentiment, and the Arab sheikhs and the Arab leadership will make deals that profit them. But one of the weaknesses of that deal, as some of our friends in intelligence and seasoned analysts pointed out, not just the two of us, but British and Israelis as well, and they said there was no peace with the Arab street, and something had to give sometime. And a lot of analysts thought something would give...
We can't hear you now, Atul. There you go. You come back.
Yeah. I said a lot of analysts thought that something would give, the scale, the size, the timing, that no one predicted, and that's what caught everyone by surprise. Please,
there are
Glenn.
two other critical elements that lead us to the current crisis and the bombings by the Israelis and the beheadings by the Gazans. The Muslim states, the Sunni Muslims, and the Gazans are Sunni Muslims, in particular Egypt, but really all of them, have no love lost whatsoever for the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a threat. The Muslim Brotherhood inspired Egyptians assassinated Anwar Sadat because he reached peace with Israel. The Muslim Brotherhood influenced Palestinians, also destabilized Jordan, and on and on. So the Egyptians have kept the Gazans from coming, even traveling to Egypt, working or anything. They are imprisoned by Egyptians, essentially, as much as from the Israelis. The Israelis fear terrorist attacks, and the Egyptians and other Muslim states fear destabilization and revolution, and with cause. The second item, I haven't even mentioned the word Iran yet. Iran has funded Hamas. They are ideologically, theologically opposed because they are Shia, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Hamas wants to harm Israel, and that serves Iran's strategic interests for two reasons. One, theologically, they oppose the Jew, and two, Iran wants to increase its influence in the Middle East. It is, I would argue, not a revolutionary power, but an expansionist one. But that's a debate for another day. The fact is that they support Hamas, as they support, and they really created Hezbollah to the north. And they are the ones, the Iranians, who have funded, armed, and provided missiles to Hamas. I think the evidence is pretty clear. They haven't said, make the October 7 attack, but they have consistently said, do whatever you can, whenever you can, to kill and harm Israel.
Glenn, there's also money flowing in from Qatar, and there's also money flowing in from other Gulf states, and a lot of that money is used by Hamas to build tunnels and missiles. In fact, the maximum money is
aid money. Yeah,
maximum money is coming from Qatar. Yeah.
Hamas has three supporters: Iran, Qatar, to the tune of billions of dollars, and then Turkey to the tune of, I think, hundreds of millions.
Exactly.
Those are the only friends that Hamas has, but they do provide a lot of material support. Most of the international aid doesn't reach the Palestinians. It's diverted by Hamas to build the tunnels and buy weapons. So the poor Palestinians are in a terrible bind. Every peace treaty, which is strategically beneficial for everyone, is beneficial for everyone except for the Palestinians, who haven't gotten anything out of these deals. That's the situation. Israel has impossible choices. An invasion would cause massive death of innocents and of Israelis, and probably, I don't see how it would achieve the objective of utterly destroying Hamas unless the Israelis occupied Gaza forever, which is not something they want to do. If they don't invade, then there will be other attempts to do more October 7s. If they continue bombing, they'll kill many more thousands of Palestinians. The assessment is that over 4.5% of the buildings in the northern half of Gaza have already been destroyed in the past 10 days. So the consequences are bad for everyone, really, except with a possible glimmer of hope. That if is the small, what's the saying? It's the small word with impossibly large implications, or something like that. If Israel were successful in functionally destroying Hamas, if the fallout of the war were to see Netanyahu's government removed, as I think is likely, and if the actions to destroy Hamas didn't cause so much suffering and destruction of Gazan Palestinians that it causes a regional war, and destroys the decades of increasing peace between Israel and Muslim states, then some entity could be placed to rule Gaza, and a two-state solution would be conceivable, which is the only possible solution to 75 years of death and strife. And that requires the loss of power of the ultra-conservatives in Israel, so that settlements stop, the loss of power of Hamas, so that Palestinians no longer pursue a millennial objective of killing every Jew on earth, and then added to that a third, if the international community, which would largely be the United States and Saudi Arabia, and maybe Qatar, were to provide massive assistance for the reconstruction and provision of a better future for Gaza, then something useful might come out of what otherwise is just going to be endless death and possibly a regional war, which, as we have heard, already 24 American servicemen have been wounded by Iranian-inspired attacks by Iranian surrogates from Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And if Americans start to die, then America will feel constrained to respond to those who did it, and it will be even worse than what we've seen so far.
So very quickly, let me respond to comments and questions. Peter Isaacson has said that the settlers specialize in terrorizing Palestinians in West Bank to ensure domination. Yes, Peter, fair enough. That's a fair point. Michael Farnhagen says that if you're going to discuss religious bias, then go back to Christians and the Inquisition. And Michelle Van Hagen says that, and Michelle absolutely agree that the Inquisition in 1492 was dreadful, and there was anti-Semitism in Europe, and of course there was the Holocaust, and the state of Israel was born out of that guilt, and they were the victims. And the Palestinian ambassador to the UK has said, we are the victims of the victims, and he's right too. And Mudit Jain, who's an industrialist in India, he says, well, there was no Hamas till 1987, and why did it come? Well, Fatah became corrupt. There was greater radicalization. Remember, the population of Hamas in 1967, when Israel took it from Egypt, was 350,000. Today, it is 2.3 million. So you've got massive population growth. Over 50% of the population is under 18. There is complete unemployment. There are lots of young men. These young men have nothing to do. They are radicalized. They are sexually frustrated. And before you laugh, that is not an inconsiderable reason for radicalization, as Glenn can tell you, and as I can tell you too. And all of that has led to good feeders for Hamas's recruitment policy. And they, frankly, have more determined leadership than Fatah as well. And yes, Mudit, we agree that the settlements are illegal by international law. We have called Bibi Netanyahu's previous coalition the coalition of crazies. And the crazies on both sides have helped each other in a vicious spiral of dissent, which has made the political culture toxic, and we'd like that to change. And you can read a lot on Fair Observer from different points of view. We'll be publishing Malaysians, we'll be publishing Turks, we have published Israelis, Professor Joseph Allmart. You can find Glenn Mee and our former chair, Gary Grappo, who was the head of the Office of the Quartet in Jerusalem, talk about it. So all of that, you can access that.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.